What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel and to another weekly 3D model. This week, we're going to be making an old photo booth. While looking around online, I came across an image of a photo booth and I thought it'd be a lot of fun to recreate for this week's video. So while looking for more photo booth references online, I kept seeing the same one pop up. This one is located at Flinders Street Station and apparently it's an iconic photo booth. It's been operating for over 56 years, so it felt only right to make this week's model based on this famous photo booth. So while trying to gather reference for this specific booth, I came across a miniature that an artist named Joshua Smith created. He did such an amazing job with all those small details, I couldn't help but want to create one of my own. So we're going to make our photo booth based off of this amazing art piece. You can find links to the reference and his website in the description below. So this week's video is just going to be a time-lapse speed modeling type of video, but if you're interested in seeing this video in real time along with access to the 3D model and working files, all of that will be available on my Patreon page, which you can find in the link in the description below. So as always, it's important not to rush the blockout stage. So we're going to take our time blocking out all of those main shapes. One of the things I liked most about this miniature Joshua created were all of the imperfections. If you take a closer look, you'll notice a lot of things are crooked, bent, and slightly misaligned. I find it gives this piece a lot of character and really adds to the whole old antique look, and I really wanted to add some of that into my own model. So when it comes to objects like the roof panels, I'm going to take a little bit more time to make sure that things are a bit crooked and bent, and try not to make each shape the same as the ones around it. My goal is to make this photo booth look a little bit worn out, like it's been running for years and needs a little bit of maintenance. I only have a day to get this one done, so let's not waste any more time and let's jump into it. So I'm going to be using the photos on Joshua's website that shows his small miniature as my main reference. So I'm going to start blocking out all of those main shapes just by simply starting off with a cube, adding a few edge loops, and we can start deleting some faces where I want the main door to go. Let's not focus on all those small details yet, let's just block out all those main shapes and we can slowly build up our photo booth. And like I already mentioned, this whole video is more or less just going to be a time-lapse speed modeling type of video, but I will be jumping in at random spots just to explain a few of the small things I'm doing, and also we will go over the UVs right before we start the texturing. So let's just continue blocking some stuff out.
Ain't nobody else's. I'm proud to say she's mine.
Alright, so now that majority of our 3D modeling is all finished, we can go ahead and start making our higher poly model. I'm basically just going to go through all these objects and start beveling some edges to make it look a bit more smooth. Now, of course, if this is going into a video game engine or something like that, you are probably going to be using a high and low poly model workflow. Now, we're not going to be doing that in this week's video, but this is the point where you would probably go ahead with the UVs before you create your higher poly model. Now, like I said, we're not going to do that just to save time. I'm just going to be creating one mesh for this week's video. So we're going to go ahead and start all of the high poly modeling, more or less just going ahead and start beveling all of our edges. Now, I will include some of that in this video just to show you what I'm doing, but after showing you just a few of the objects that I'm smoothing or adding bevels to, we're just going to skip ahead to when I was done all of that. We can go over those UVs. So let's start adding some bevels. Alright, so here is the model in its finished form. Now, like I said, I did go ahead and smooth out a lot of these objects. I just added simple bevels around these corners just to make them nice and round. And same with these, for example, I just went ahead and just gave them a small bevel. So all of these are technically higher in polys because they're all beveled out. And I also split this thing up into 4 groups. So I went ahead and completed all of the UV mapping. Now, if you're interested in seeing that whole process, it will be available in the real-time video, which will be uploaded to my Patreon page, and you can find that link in the description below. But like I said, I split this thing up into 4 different groups for the 4 different textures I have applied. So on the very first group is the top sign. Now, no reason why I separated this. I just wanted to get the most resolution out of my textures, so I thought 4 would be fitting for a piece like this. But of course, you can group them however you think is necessary. Now, keep in mind, if you are making this for a video game, you should probably reduce this to less textures, like probably 1 or 2 tops. But since we're not limited with a game engine or anything, I just decided to have a few extra. So that first group, like I said, is the top sign. Now, I made sure that all of my UV shells were nice and straight, just so we're not having any weird warping on any of these. And also I wanted to add some nice wood grain texture on the wood, so having that nice and straight would just help me achieve that material in Substance Painter without having any weird warping. The second group is the walls, so that's basically majority of the main objects in the scene. Once again, keeping them nice and straight, all of my UV shells. The third group are just all the objects, so basically the interior components, the walls as well, and the floor. And the last group are just the labels. So I wanted to separate these since I knew this was the most important when it came to the materials and the textures, was having that resolution and all the wording. I didn't want to have it really blurry, especially the pictures that we're going to have in here. So I just wanted to separate all of the labels, including the interior ones, into their own texture. Now, this was a little unnecessary on the interior components. I was planning on actually having wording in here, but the texturing took a little bit longer. The whole model took a little bit longer than I thought. So by the end of the whole texturing process, I just decided to simplify it and not add any labels since you really couldn't see them. and just kind of keep the camera view not directly looking inside so you can see that. Now, if you look at the model, you probably noticed a few extra things that I added at the last minute. Now, I wasn't planning on actually adding these into the scene, and a lot of these are actually the ground items. So I added these tiny pieces of grass using the content browser, and I also added a piece of just like garbage, just a simple plane to act as some sort of paper. I also added those little cigarette buds that I saw in the reference. I really like that, how he added those in the scene, so I thought it'd be fun to add those tiny objects. And the leaves. Now, I really wasn't planning on adding the leaves. I had them just saved in my computer, like in a folder, so I had the asset available. I'm not sure where it's from, to be honest with you. And like I said, I wasn't planning on adding them. I just filled them in quickly just to see what it would look like, and I actually liked it, so I kept them in. Now you can just make a quick leaf by just making a simple plane and giving it that shape. But that's just a tiny detail I decided to add. And if you look at the reference photo, he had a bunch of grass and plants sitting in the corner, and to be honest, that would have been a really cool route to go down. I don't really make plants that often, but I'm sure there's some amazing artists out there that work with vegetation, and I'm sure there's lots of free assets available out there that we could have used as well, but that would be a nice little piece to add into this model. But that's basically everything. That is how I set up this photo booth. Now we can export this thing, jump over to Substance Painter, and we can start our texturing. All right, so now jumping over to Substance Painter, we can go ahead and load in our FBX file from Maya. Now everything when it comes to texturing is pretty straightforward. The only thing I had to do was create some of my own labels since I really couldn't find them online. So the main one being that large label, basically the main label on the side of the whole photo booth. I couldn't find a nice reference online to recreate or just stamp it onto my mesh. So I more or less had to find one online and modify it to make it black so it looks similar to my reference, and then modify it a tiny bit just to change some of the wording just to make it relevant to this model. And for all of those white pieces of paper, the labels on the very front below that main sign, I just created those in Photoshop. So I just created a simple alpha. That way I can just paste those directly onto my pieces of paper. So then we can quickly texture all of these objects. Now, when it comes to models like this photo booth that have a lot of wear and tear, it just takes a lot of time to slowly build those materials up. So my advice is just to slowly work your way towards that. Don't rush in and start adding tons of grunge and dirt. I always like to slowly build up those layers by adding little bits of dirt and grunge, and you can kind of layer them on top of each other. I really find you get much more realistic results that way, rather than just filling it in with one black mask, for example, and just kind of going with that. So we're going to take our time with the texturing. It might take a little bit longer than usual, but that's just because there's so many tiny details going on. I really want to capture all of that. All those little bits of rust and all the wear and tear. I really want this thing to look old and beaten up, like it's been sitting here for years being used. So to achieve that kind of look, we need to slowly build up our materials. Oh, also don't forget to change your shader. Since we are using opacity in our materials, having those see-through plastic covers on our labels and all of that, we do need to add an opacity channel. And you can do that by changing the shader to alpha blending and then adding an opacity channel to your texture set. And another quick tip, I know I've mentioned this a few times before, is just changing your lighting to a studio light. Right off the bat, it comes in as panorama, which uses a sun as its main light source, which gives you a kind of like a yellow tint to your lighting. Now that's great and all, it can give you really nice results, but it can also skew your materials a little bit and give it kind of a yellow hint. So when you're actually looking at your materials in Substance and you export them to bring them into Maya or into Unreal Engine or something, your materials can look a little bit different when you're actually using a different lighting source. So right off the bat, I like to change my lighting to a studio light that uses white light. That way you're just seeing the materials more or less how they actually are before you add any sort of colored lighting to your scene. So that's one thing I always like to do when I start off my texturing in Substance Painter. All right, so let's just continue the texturing process. Let's slowly fill in all of these empty white meshes with some sort of material, and then we can start refining them and hopefully make it look closer to our reference photo. And don't forget, if you're interested in seeing this full video in real time, it will be available on my Patreon page, which you can find in the link in the description below. All right, and that is everything. That is the whole 3D modeling, UV mapping, and texturing process that I did to create this old photo booth. If you like this video, give it a like, and please consider subscribing to the channel to see more random weekly 3D models. And as always, I want to give a massive thank you to all of my patrons. You guys are all amazing, and I really can't thank you enough for all of your continuous support. And I also want to give a really big thank you to Joshua Smith for making such an awesome miniature and inspiring this week's video. Once again, if you want to see any of his work or his website, it will be linked in the description below. All right, thanks so much for tuning in to this week's video, and I will catch you guys in the next one.